Hey everyone, welcome to the Tank Rides. Here's a question. What's the correct number of bikes to own? And of course, the answer is always one more than the number you actually have. So, after months and months of trying to resist getting hold of an aero bike, I decided that it was finally time to take the plunge. I settled on the Ribble Aero 883 disc, which is the bike that you see before you now. So I was going to talk a little bit about the bike and also about the wheels that I got with it, the Zipp 302s, which have come out reasonably recently. Should first of all explain, of course, that Ribble is an online retailer. You can buy bikes essentially off the shelf that they've built up beforehand, or you can go onto a bike builder function on their website and choose from an array of different options and spec your own bike. And that's what I decided to do with this one. I thought if I was going to get myself an aero frame, I wanted to get the right components to go with it to really unleash the potential of something like this, make sure that it could run nice and quick. So I'll just talk through a little bit about the bike itself and the thinking behind buying this particular one. I really hesitated to buy this. I have a sort of sportive style, slightly more relaxed bike with 105 and with normal alloy wheels, which has been great and I've really enjoyed it. But in club runs in certain situations, particularly on the flat, I was finding I was getting left a little bit behind into when the speed picked up. So I was kind of tempted. I've got to keep up with the crowd after all. So a little bit about the choices I made in terms of the build before I get on to talking about the wheels. 44cm level 3 aero carbon bar. This is something that Ribble retail. I don't think you can get it elsewhere. I can't find a lot of information about it, but it's basically just, you know, it's an aero carbon bar. Full mechanical Ultegra R8000 group set. I didn't go for anything electronic, partly because it's bloody expensive and I can't afford it, and partly because I like the idea that if I've got mechanical, there's a vague chance I might be able to fix it on the road if something goes wrong. Not likely, but possible. Physique Antares saddle, and then I finished that off with the Zipp 302 disc wheels. So it's difficult to get quoted weights for Ribble bikes. They don't really tell you what their bikes weigh, partly because there's so many different options to choose from and you can spec them how you want, so it's kind of pointless. But they do tell you the frame weight. This is an XL size bike, 58cm frame. The quoted weight for these frames is 1,200 grams, although I suspect that's probably for a slightly smaller size, probably a medium, I'm guessing, I don't know, and 470 grams for the forks. I've weighed this bike with pedals and with the bottle cages and it comes out at 8.5 kilograms total, which is not too bad for a large bike. It's around the same weight as my previous one, obviously a bit more aero though. There's a 2-year warranty on the frame and the frame has clearance for tyres of about 25mm. You might be able to squeeze a 28mm in there, but it would be bloody tight on the rear wheel. You'd probably have slightly more luck on the front. So this bike, my first impressions are it performs really well. I can definitely feel the difference of having an aero frame. You've got that sort of teardrop shape on the down tube. You've got the cutaway seat tube, the chain stays, you can see a slightly bent, sort of pulling that rear wheel into the frame, which means you end up with a slightly shorter wheelbase than I have on my slightly more relaxed road bike that I've been riding previously. So the wheelbase for this one, if you want to get really geeky and talk numbers, is 1019.6mm as compared to about 1024 for the one I have previously. The other thing to note is just the incredible stiffness of this frame. You can see it in the bottom bracket. It's really built up and chunky. The frame is rigid as hell, and I've read a few reviews saying that it makes for a very stiff, uncompromising ride. I don't really notice that too badly, but then I'm coming off a bike that had 23mm tyres onto something with 25, so obviously the extra rubber is going to damp down a few of the bumps. I've probably had a very harsh ride on my previous bike anyway. For me, it's not a deal breaker at all. Because of that shorter wheelbase, the cornering is really good. It's nice and sharp. It doesn't wallow through corners in the way that some other bikes I've tried do, so it's quite responsive. And it's less relaxed. I've got to say it's definitely less relaxed. So the stack's 587mm on this bike, 404mm reach, and the stack to reach ratio is 1.45. I think my other bike's about 1.59, so it pulls you down into a more aero position, helps you to get a flatter back, so you're moving through the air more quickly just by virtue of the fact you've got a slightly different position. So I've had to learn to ride this bike in a slightly different way. You do have to really sort of wring its neck a little bit, especially if you want to get the most out of it on a climbs. It isn't the lightest bike out there, but you can compensate for that by really getting out the saddle and stomping on the pedals. It's so stiff that the power goes right through the cranks and onto the road, and so that comes out really well. I have had a few niggles with it. First of all, delivery. Ribble did not cover themselves in glory when it came to the order process for this bike. I ordered it at the end of 2018. I didn't get it until the end of February, I think it was, 2019. They seem to have had some issues with their supplier. I don't know what the reasons were. They weren't particularly communicative, but it got there in the end. And frankly, you know, it was winter when I ordered it. I knew it was going to take a while because I've ordered from Ribble before, and it generally does. So that's one thing to be aware of. The prices start at $1,699 for the most basic build. And the other thing I did have a problem with the front mech. When it arrived, the front mech, if you pushed it into the big ring, the front mech was actually rubbing against the inside of the crank arm, which was an absolute pain. I had to take it to a mechanic to make sure it was done right, but Ribble were pretty good about it. I told them what the problem was and they refunded me the few pounds that it cost to get it sorted out. Not something that I should have had to deal with, but you know, not the end of the world. So it's a really good performing bike, and one of the other reasons why it performs so well getting onto the wheels is because of these Zipp 302s, the disc version. This is a fantastic wheel set. I've been so impressed by these. I watched a lot of reviews. I read some very positive reviews. I think Cycling Weekly gave it their editor's choice, and I can absolutely see why. They are not the lightest. They've got a claimed weight of 1,695 grams total, so that's 910 grams for the rear wheel and 785 for the front. They're a 45mm rim depth, and then they use Sapim CX Sprint spokes with brass nipples. So these are, I've had trouble with straight pull spokes in the past. If you break a spoke and you're out on a Sportive or something and it's a straight pull, the chances are that the mechanic is not going to be able to help you, because they can quite often be specific to a certain type of wheel. The good thing about these Sapim spokes is that, you know, they're J-bend. You've got a much better chance of somebody being able to fix it on the fly if you're doing, you know, if you're doing a big Sportive or something like that. Internal rim width of these wheels is 16.25mm. They fit 25mm tyres very nicely. They are not tubeless ready, which is something that I know bothers a few people. It doesn't bother me because, quite frankly, I'm not ready for tubeless. These Zipp 302s, they are the dare I say it, budget wheel set for Zipp. They retail at around £1,000. I think you can get them for a little bit less with certain retailers from time to time. They don't have any of the dimples or any of the other whizzy things that Zipp do to make your wheels more aero, but I've never had a set of carbon wheels before, and I've never had a set of wheels with a deeper section on them. So I mean, I noticed the difference straight away in terms of how aero they are, and as I've said, they're nice and stiff, so they really transfer your power well. Durability, well, I've only done 1,000 or so kilometres, so it's a little bit difficult to tell. I have unfortunately slammed them through a couple of really deep potholes out here on the Kent roads, and they seem to be okay. It's not something I want to make a habit of, I've got to say, but they seem to be reasonably durable. They take a maximum rider weight of 115 kilograms and a maximum pressure of 125 psi. I have heard that in the wet they can fill up with water. I have not tried this because I don't really want to ride this bike in the wet much. This is a special occasion summer bike. It's not for yomping around in the wet and the grit in the winter. The wheels look great. I really like those big white Zipp decals. They are slightly bobbly in places because I think they're put on, well, they are put on by hand, and you can take them off and replace them with different colours and so on and so forth. It looks like that might be something I'll have to do at some point because I'm not sure how long those are going to stay looking the way they do at the moment. And I always like to hear what a freewheel sounds like when I'm choosing a pair of wheels. You want to know what a wheel sounds like. I'm not a huge fan of really, really loud freewheels. This one isn't. It's fairly sensible sounding, fairly understated. People aren't going to hear you coming from miles away, so this is what it sounds like. Okay, well I hope you found this useful. It's just been a very quick run through of the Ribble Aero 883 disc with the Zipp 302 wheels that accompany it. As I say, very, very impressed by both of them. Ribble, despite their delivery issues, I do definitely recommend as a bike brand. And the Zipp 302s, you know, if you're not a complete weight weenie and you're not looking for the lightest wheel set in the world, I mean, these are a great, I think, all-round compromise between aero, weight and looks.